Hello and welcome to the Spiked podcast. I'm Fraser Myers, Deputy Editor of Spiked. Delighted to be joined as ever by Spike's editor Tom Slater.
Hello.
And for the first time, special guest, writer and commentator Esther Kreku. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we've got loads to talk about on today's show. We'll be discussing Keir Starmer's anti-immigration turn, the man arrested for possessing Brexity things, and the footballer who knows what a woman is and was subsequently banned for it. Tom, do you want to tell us a little bit about the exciting event we've got coming up before we get into all that?
No, absolutely. There are still tickets left to our very special event that we're holding in a couple of weeks' time in Westminster. It's on Wednesday, the 28th of May. Andrew Doyle is going to be joining me on stage to discuss his new book, The End of Woke. It's going to be a great night. We're going to have discussion. There'll be a few drinks later on. You might even be able to get a signed copy of Andrew's book as well. This is exclusively for Spike supporters, people who donate to the website. So if you're already a Spike supporter, go over to the site now, log in, you can buy your ticket. If you're not already a Spike supporter, now is obviously the perfect time to sign up. You can come to this event, future events, be able to comment on the articles, all kinds of other perks. So if you're interested in signing up to come to this event, go to spiked-online.com/supporters. We hope to see you there.
Keir Starmer gave a major speech this week on immigration. He said he wants a clean break with how things have been dealt with in the past, where various politicians have said one thing, that they're going to reduce the numbers, and then done the opposite. Obviously, having a sly dig at the Tories there, who continually promised to reduce numbers and then increase them to record levels. Tom, the speech has been probably far more controversial than it should be. I mean, there's been a number of phrases that people have picked up on, things like him suggesting that we are becoming an island of strangers.
We risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together.
People have suggested there's references to Enoch Powell. Even the fact that he's, wanting to reduce immigration rather than celebrate it has been taken as quasi-fascistic and right-wing. What have you made of it?
I mean, of all the things I had on my bingo card for this Labour government, Keir Starmer being accused of being like Enoch Powell was definitely not on that list. I mean, he's finally managed to get one memorable phrase in a speech, and yet it's led to him apparently remaining in infamy for the rest of his political life. I think it was really interesting, the kind of gap between the commentariat response and everyone else. So broadly speaking, there's still a lot of scepticism, obviously, that Labour are going to take the issue of migration seriously, not least because Keir Starmer himself, when he was elected Labour leader, was saying we need to make the case for freedom of movement, signing letters opposing, the deportation of foreign criminals and so on. So there's a credibility issue. And also, if you look at what they're proposing, it's very unlikely to reduce migration to the numbers that people are, broadly speaking, in favour of. I mean, it's never going to be anywhere near under these proposals where it was before Brexit, let alone 1997 when the last Labour government first came in. But at the same time, the response, the kind of pearl clutching, the insistence that he touched some kind of third rail here, pick your cliche, it's just absolutely incredible at this point. I mean, it was
predictable,
very predictable, but at the same time, so much more hysterical than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I mean, all he was saying was that immigration is a good thing. There's all sorts of benefits. I celebrate that. He made a point of saying that, but there is clearly a problem with the combination of mass immigration and poor integration. That is something which commands not even just like a slim majority, but very clear majority support in the country. But it's still heresy for large parts of not just the usual suspects in the kind of left of the Labour Party, or the kind of Labour Party in exile, the ones who have been kicked out and haven't been let back in yet, Zara Sultana, John McDonnell, etc. So yeah, it's that big gap between, are these policies actually going to work? What the commentariat is saying and what the public are actually kind of taking in. Just never has that chasm felt so big, I guess.
Yeah, Esther, what have you made of that kind of disconnect? Because it does feel as if, there's a disconnect between what Keir is actually proposing, which is reducing migration to maybe slightly higher than 2010 levels, and that's supposedly hysterical. And also this idea that what he's saying is offensive, outrageous, when probably the vast majority of people, even Green Party voters, actually want to reduce migration or think it's currently too high. What do you make of that?
I mean, he's very good at annoying everyone.
Yeah.
So in some ways, his speech didn't go far enough because the white paper made virtually no mention of illegal immigration. And, he ruled out leaving the ECHR and things that people on the right of Labour have been calling for. So in many ways, the people were scratching their heads and thinking, okay, but what about these fine gentlemen from God knows where that are rocking up on our shores on a daily basis? He promised to smash the gangs. The gangs seem to be doing just fine.
Yeah.
I mean, the average gang makes upwards of £1 million in revenue monthly. I mean, just from recruiting people to buy into their scheme to try and get them into these countries illegally. So this idea that you're going to play whack-a-mole with gangs that have really very low risk, very low cost, they just need a dinghy and people vulnerable enough to get on them, and they don't really care if you drown in the Channel or the Mediterranean or anything. This idea that he's going to smash that is laughable. We haven't even managed to smash the drug gangs, which again is the same strategy. You smash one and another takes its place. You get cocaine off the streets, well, it's in the hands of the next gang the next week. So it just doesn't make sense. And he's not grappling with the idea that you have to make fundamentally Britain an unattractive place to these people. I mean, we've heard reports today that he may be considering sending people to Albania or a third country or even Rwanda, which is where we've thrown a lot of money at. But the usual suspects that are clutching their pearls and saying that Keir Starmer is basically Enoch Powell. I mean, they're acting like 1.5 million people moving to the UK in the last 2 years is some sort of quaint cultural exchange. I mean, it's madness. It's completely unsustainable. I mean, I've heard from like sort of ridiculous arguments that like immigrants built this country, and I think, well, no, the actual British population has remained virtually stable since the beginning of time. Immigrants, yes, have made valuable contributions, but they didn't build this country, the infrastructure, the culture, everything. You can't make an argument against immigration control by creating complete fiction out of history. And these are the kinds of people that really, Keir Starmer actually needs to start ignoring them. Because not only do they see immigrants as a bunch of genderless widgets that come here to work, like they have no soul or culture, they just, they are nominally useful to prop up GDP figures. They don't actually humanize them. But they also think that Britain is a fundamentally different country if we don't pretend like we don't have a border. And I think Keir Starmer is starting to realize how toxic that is. That being said, no one's going to trust him because it's a complete 180. I mean, he's actually voted against every single immigration reform bill since 2015, to the extent that he voted against voter ID. He has no track record of believing an iota of what he was saying.
I did love that he defended himself by saying, I'm not responding to the rise of reform in the local elections.
Or any party.
He didn't name check them, didn't name check Farage. This is simply what I believe in, and that was
since when?
That was probably the least.
And the only
moment
question
of the
he answered with any genuine conviction in the press conference was when someone said, "What about the ECHR?" I was like, "Nope." So that's who he is, and it's just so striking that regardless of where you come from on the immigration question, the democratic deficit that exists here is so huge. I mean, there was a poll out this week reported in the Telegraph from I think it was called Merlin Strategy, and they looked at basically what level of migration would people like to see, broadly speaking. It's only about 5% of the country who want it to be net migration to be about 500,000 or above, which is roughly where we are currently after the record few years that we've had. It's only about 15% that want it to be 100,000 net and above, which we haven't had since 1997. So you have that clear demand. It's been expressed through various elections, referenda at this point, that people are concerned about the combination of immigration and integration, that these things have gone awry and that they want to see it reckoned with. And yet any attempt to even, as these proposals do, kind of tinker around the edges with it is treated as heresy. And what's so strange about it, because I completely agree with your point, Esther, about is people on the nominally pro-migration side, first of all, don't seem to engage with it very much. They just sort of look into the middle distance and talk in platitudes. Like they haven't really thought about, they're not even willing to concede that what's happened over the course of the past few years, let alone the past 20 years, as being historically quite unique. And also, they just treat migrants as like a kind of stage army in their kind of fantasy land. It's not about actually welcoming these people as individuals to join this country. There's something about this country worth joining, something that we can build together. It's just purely, I appreciate them because they're the kind of multicultural fun wallpaper of my life, like rather than it being anything deeper. So it's one of those things where it's so clear now. It's interesting at the very least that Starmer clearly recognises that he has to address this rhetorically, if nothing else. That's definitely a shift where he's concerned. But at the same time, that gap that still exists between what voters have been clearly expressing and what politicians are willing to offer is still enormous.
This episode of the Spike Podcast is sponsored by Manual. Have you been catching your reflection in the mirror lately and noticing your hairline isn't quite where it used to be? Or maybe those extra strands in the shower are getting a bit more difficult to ignore. Plenty of men will have been there. The worst thing you can do about it is nothing. The sad truth is, hair loss doesn't fix itself. But with Manual, you can at least do something about it. Manual is a hair loss treatment service that actually knows what it's doing, combining science, tech, and medical expertise to build treatment plans that are personalised and proven. There's no weird snake oils or sketchy supplements, just real options for every stage of hair loss. You can have confidence in Manual, knowing that over 450,000 men already trust them to save their hairlines, and 92% of men see results. Why not join them? Getting started is easy. All you need to do is answer a few questions about your hair loss and medical history, and one of Manual's UK licensed experts will help put together your very own customized plan. You could start treatment in just 2 days and then see real changes in as little as 3 to 6 months. Bald can definitely be beautiful, but if it's not your look, Manual's got you covered. Go right now to manual.co/spiked to get started. And when you do, you'll get 55% off your first order. That's 55% off your first order when you go to manual.co/spiked. manual.co/spiked for 55% off. Did anyone see the tweet from one of these sort of Remainer FBP types? And she talked about how she had given a nice candle to her Nepalese neighbour and complimented a transgender person on their hat. And it just sort of summed up the sort of that kind of, this is not, we're not talking about real people, actually. You almost don't believe it when they say we have all my friends are immigrants, because that's not how you talk about other human beings. They are just symbolic of something.
Well, they don't realize that it's kind of the ultimate like ruthless capitalist behavior. Like, I don't care where these people come from so far as they clean my toilets. They don't actually humanize immigrants, yet they think they're the party, or they're the groups of people that are for nice, kind, warm speech. You have to recognize that human beings have a culture and have a consciousness and have certain beliefs, because then you can actually start to decide which people are the best fit for your society. But because they're too lazy to go down that route, or they're so deluded into thinking that it's actually prejudice, they don't want to do that. Bear in mind, Keir Starmer is the person that suggested that even saying that migration had a downward pressure on low wages, already low wages, was xenophobic. No one is going to believe this transformation, but he has to address this in some way, and he's managed to irritate both sides. I mean, if you're going to do it, just go for it completely. If you're going to talk about this issue and use statements like, island of strangers, talk about illegal immigration, talk about the fact that you're failing on the gangs spectacularly, talk about the fact that there are people raising concerns that there are strange men hanging around their children's primary and secondary schools. Just like MPs back in 2001, Labour MPs were saying the same thing. We've noticed men of a particular ilk hanging around our schools trying to groom young women. Like, just go for it. Say it. Well, because he's already annoyed the Owen Joneses of the world anyway. What are you trying to say? And even saying that he wants to get back to 2010 levels. Well, in 2010, David Cameron said and promised that he'd get us back to 1997 levels. So which level are you talking about? The intended or the what actually happened? It's all a complete mess.
And it's fascinating precisely because of the Tory deception on this. I mean, I think the Tories' record on immigration, obviously we all know that it's been a tremendous failure from the perspective of what they promised and what they delivered, but like the scale of it is really quite striking. I mean, they kind of committed a form of political fraud, effectively.
It's treasonous.
One thing after another, they said, we're going to reduce migration to tens of thousands, we're going to reduce migration to tens of thousands. Boris Johnson comes in, bit more vague, we'll just bring numbers down. And in every situation, it continues to go up and up. And they wonder why they're now basically kind of absent from this discussion. It's just, what is Keir Starmer saying and what is Reform saying in response? Because they've neutralised themselves,
They think people just can't forgive them. They need to let go bygones be bygones. There are two things about that. First of all, I find it astonishing that Kemi Badenoch can stand on any platform and talk about reducing immigration when she was the person that removed the requirement to advertise jobs in the UK before you opened it up to foreign workers. That's actually incredible to me. And secondly, the fact that the Tories just think, people need to forgive us, or Reform are not a serious party. Once you get to the point where people think, actually, they can't be worse than this lot, you've officially lost. I find this entitlement from the major parties quite astonishing. Like, the only thing Keir Starmer believes in, if he believes in anything, is that he should be in charge. He doesn't have a single conviction in his body. Like, to the extent that he's done a complete 180 overnight, it just shows me that, okay, I don't really care what you believe. You just believe that you should be leader. Yeah. That's it. Like, that's all you think.
I mean, it is in character with Starmer, to be fair. He's done a 180 on migration, 180 on the trans issue, 180 on tuition fees. I mean, you could...
Nationalisation.
Nationalisation. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. So perhaps, well, who knows? As you've said, you expect to see a Rwanda scheme pop up in a week's time or something similar. This episode of the Spike Podcast is also sponsored by Shopify. Now, starting your own business can be incredibly rewarding, but it can also be overwhelming. Yes, you get to be your own boss and set your own hours, but suddenly you're also the marketing department, the accountant, and everything in between. It's a lot to figure out on your own. And that's where Shopify comes in. That's the sound of Shopify, the commerce platform behind millions of businesses all over the world. Whatever you're selling, Shopify supports everyone. from brands just getting started to household names like Mattel and Gymshark. Shopify's design studio comes with hundreds of ready-to-use templates that perfectly match your brand from the start, so you don't need a background in design or coding. And if you need a headline, page title, or product description, Shopify's handy AI tools have you covered, generating polished content for your business while letting you get on with the important stuff, selling products that people love. Shopify even helps to create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling. That means no matter how small or new your business, you'll feel like you've got a whole marketing team behind you. Best of all, Shopify is a commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from international shipping to managing inventory. Whatever your needs may be, Shopify is always ready to meet them. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your £1 per month trial period and start selling today at shopify.co.uk/spiked. Go to shopify.co.uk/spiked. That's shopify.co.uk/spiked. Should we move on to talk about the Brexity things?
Yes,
yes.
let's do it.
This was Julian Fawkes, a retired police officer in Kent, suddenly had 6 police officers turn up at his house, rifling through his stuff, noticing books by Douglas Murray, noticing the Spectator magazine, one officer calling out that this man has very Brexity things. He was actually arrested over a tweet. He was having an argument with a sort of pro-Palestine type, and this triggered this bizarre police investigation. Tom, what have you made of it?
I mean, it's first of all, as soon as you saw that police rifling through someone's bookshelves and finding Brexity things and being alarmed by it, you know, chill ran down my spine.
Exactly.
None of us are safe at this point. As you said, the actual tweet that he was hauled in for and eventually cautioned for was condemning anti-Semitism. In effect, he was having this online row, and someone was talking about their participation in the marches and whatever. And he suggested that a lot of these activists were one step away from, you know, raiding Heathrow looking for Jewish passengers. It was a reference to what had gone on recently in Dagestan in Russia, where you had that kind of would-be pogrom kickoff because they found out that there was a flight incoming from Israel and they all sort of showed up in force. So it was a anti-racist, anti-Semitic tweet, and yet the Met Intelligence Command got a hold of it, passed it on to Kent Police, and they show up at this guy's house, mob-handed, going through with the evidence bags. You would have thought he was involved in organised crime or something. Like the amount of police presence was absolutely insane. I think that the extra flavour here, of course, is the body cam footage and them going through and finding the materials that you say and commenting in passing about how very Brexity it is, as if, you know, more than half the country didn't vote for that not too long ago. It was one of those cases which I think has hammered home how this could happen to almost anyone at this point because of the fact that the police are essentially just out to lunch on this issue. Like, they don't even understand the laws they're supposed to actually enforce. I mean, he was given this caution, which he acquiesced to, but it's now been scrubbed from his record as soon as the Free Speech Union got involved. He broke no law whatsoever. So even if we wanted to have a discussion about how bad our speech laws are in this country and the craziness that is 30 people a day now being arrested for grossly offensive speech under communications legislation, what's a huge part of this is the fact that the police are just grabbing this with both hands. They're relishing this role that they have for themselves. I think a large part of it is the fact that they see this as a way to improve their image, a way to kind of be seen as on the side of the righteous and whatever, and to rebut a kind of a slightly dodgier legacy they might have had in the past. But the upshot of it is people having less trust in the police and being much more fearful about someone showing up at their door as a consequence. So it's just, we've become inured to these stories, and yet this one I think is cut through just because of how egregious it was, I suppose.
Yeah. Esther, what do you...
I mean, I think it's the reason why the police are excited to go after these cases is because it's easy. It's like low-hanging fruit. I mean, you actually have to stand outside of Wetherspoons in the freezing cold on a Friday night to, you know, rip apart a fight between Mitch from Mitcham and Eggy from Skeggy. You actually have to put in some work to do that. But if you're combing through tweets to find out who to arrest, like, you know, a Telegraph journalist, for example, or an ex-police officer, that's easy. Just turn up at the door, make some vague comments. So I think it's low-hanging fruit. I don't think actually there should be any kind of room in the duty of police officers to comb through tweets and arrest people. I mean, unless you have a consistent track record of calling for violence or stalking behavior or actual criminal behavior that looks like it's threatening to the public, not people's feelings, but actual to the people's physical health, I don't think that's the police's business. I feel like it's quite embarrassing, and we're now developing a reputation as a country, shockingly so, as one where people are terrified of what they say in public because they can have the police, who really should be doing better things like solving a burglary, which many police officers haven't done in like 3 to 5 years. Why are we becoming a country that is more scared of posting things on Twitter than actually someone burgling our house and getting them caught and sent to prison?
And it's interesting, the speed of the response. You're right, Tom, to say they really relished this. I mean, it was within a day or so of the Kent Police, being informed by this Met Intelligence Unit about this tweet. That they really, they went to his house. They had 6 officers.
Yeah.
And there are so many, seeing the footage of a lot of these cases. It was similar with Maxie Allen, the Times radio producer, who basically had done nothing more than slag off a school governor in a private WhatsApp group. Again, a big crowd of officers turning up at the house, as if you're going to have to, wrestle with them, or dealing with someone actually dangerous. It's really shocking.
And the way in which they kind of turn around after the story gets reported, or after more light is shone on it, and they say, "Well, we've apologised," as if it's nothing to put someone in a cell for hours on end, which happened with Maxie Allen, and also happened with this gentleman down in Kent. Julian Fawkes was talking about the fact that he was petrified that his neighbours would think he was like some kind of paedophile or whatever, because they were like pulling hard drives out of laptops out of his house in evidence bags and so on. Like the level of the sort of police harassment of ordinary people for no other thing than expressing an opinion, even a perfectly legal opinion under the very narrow bounds that we have in this country, is a horrendous state of affairs. And yet it's just become kind of normal. Oh, we just went a little bit over the top. And I think one thing that's becoming really clear is so much of this is coming from within the police themselves. There was often this slightly more sympathetic take, which is, well, they're enforcing bad laws set by politicians, and ultimately it's the politicians' job to put this right. They're going above and beyond that all the time now. You even saw it periodically where they would launch these campaigns. There was a police in Merseyside, the shop outside Nasda, with a big sign saying, being offensive is an offence. Please come forward and tell us if someone said something that's upset you, or what have you. Like they're trawling for this stuff now. It's like, either on their own systems or asking people to report.
Merseyside as well. Like, Scousers are like professionals at defending each other. It's like a cultural stamp of approval.
They would never do anything
to get the best job in there.
They're making work for themselves and not doing anything else. But it's and I think there's obvious reasons for that. We've talked a lot about it on this podcast on Spiked, but I think particularly kind of post McPherson, post the Met being declared institutionally racist and whatever, they took precisely the wrong lessons from that. Yeah. Which was not that, of course, we should investigate all things without fear or favour, but was that we need to get into the business of policing speech. And that actually that's how you rebuild trust with particular communities who might have been failed in the past. Like as if, whether it's the Jewish community in this case or the black community in another case or whatever it might be, that they're going to get a warm feeling because they know that you're going after pensioners for saying unclear things on the internet rather than making sure that their kids aren't robbed or stabbed on the way home from school. Like it's absurd and obscene, but it's the message they seem to have taken from the past 20 years or so.
And the other thing you've alluded to there is the sort of non-crime hate incident. It's the sort of policing tool that never dies, that has been, there have been court cases over it. The High Court said you should stop recording these things. Various Home Secretaries have said the police need to stop recording this. It carries on anyway, and there are, I think, is there 50 a day recorded or something? There's certainly more than the level of arrests, and sometimes over the most preposterous things imaginable. I mean, some of my favourite cases are when, talked about these before, but when a gay man complained that his drug dealer had ripped him off because he'd been gay, or the man who felt that he was given an aggressive haircut by his barber, or
that bloke who's whistling Bob the Builder.
Whistling Bob the Builder, that triggered a non-crime hate incident. So as you say, the police are all over this. They're going way, way above and beyond the law. They see it almost, it's become their guiding purpose almost to get themselves involved in sort of minor disputes and in correcting how we think and what we say.
I mean, this is just adds to the public perception that there's so much wrong with, of course, public life in Britain, but especially the police. I mean, to the extent that police are clearly prioritizing easier, low-hanging fruit cases that are really, I mean, there should be no such thing as a non-crime hate incident. Like if it's not a crime, it's not the police's business. You shouldn't have police, jumping at the scene just to arrest someone over a tweet. But even more so, like, standards have fallen through the floor. It's a lot harder to recruit quality policemen. You have, direct entry superintendents that have never even policed a bar on a weekend, that don't know anything about the basics of policing. This emphasis on communication and nice views, like even down to the physical health of police officers. Like, loads of them are overweight, and they're just like, they're
Great
not
social media
imposing.
content too.
Well, but it's true.
And
It's true. Or like sometimes the complete lack of common sense. I mean, have you seen that clip of these two female police officers trying to arrest this criminal, and he just like nudges one of them with his elbow and runs off? I mean, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And I've had incidents where I've called the police literally for a semi-nude, and I'm talking like I'm seeing the entirety of his bottom half, like man, completely drugged up, high, sitting there with a wine bottle, like intimidating women. And they sent 2 female police officers, and they came and told us, oh, we've ordered an ambulance in case he needs help. The complete lack of common sense of police officers. This is why when they boast that incidents of crime or crime reporting has gone down, it's because the public don't have faith. They don't believe you can do anything. They see you more keener on arresting people over tweets than actually going to solve crime.
You
That's
just
the
need
problem.
you just need to say that man was in possession of a Brexty book.
Exactly.
That had really sent the heavies down.
Misgendered
Oh, he
you or
misgendered
whatever.
me.
misgendered you.
Yeah.
That's the way out.
Right, finally, let's talk about the teenage footballer who was banned from 6 matches because she described a male player as a man. So this is a autistic girl. She was 17 at the time. She noticed that a transgender woman was on the other side on a team called Manchester Laces, which prides itself as an inclusive football team. She says to the transgender player, "Are you a man?" Then she goes to the referee and raises her concerns about the fact that there's a male on the pitch. This is dangerous. We know that lots of injuries have been caused by this kind of thing, and she's slapped with a 6-match ban. The FA has since had to change its policy after the Supreme Court ruling that says that we shouldn't have trans women on women's teams. But they haven't apologised to her. They haven't rescinded. They haven't said that actually yes, you're in the right. But it's pretty shocking, isn't it? You just state a statement of truth to get you banned from.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that just because football isn't typically a sort of it's not rugby or it's not boxing, doesn't mean that there's not a clear threat when you've got someone who's had the benefits of male puberty going into a flying slide tackle or something like this. It's so obvious to anyone with even a modicum of common sense. The fact that the FA were continuing down this route and punishing people just for pointing this out. I have to say the interview that she gave I thought was the most striking thing, just because of how you get the sense that people are much more confidently pushing back against these things now. I think she was asked, do you feel any regret or any, do you feel sorry for that trans player who now is no longer able to compete? She said no.
Yeah.
And it was completely within her rights to do so. It was, if anything, the question should have been asked in the other direction. Like, why do you think it's acceptable to, just for the sake of your own self-image, eat away at women's sport and actually put these young women in danger at the same time? But, I think one thing that's, it was obviously positive that the FA have changed their policy, but I think one thing going forward that will be really clear is that there's, even with the Supreme Court ruling, there's a battle to be had within all of these different institutions. They're going to try and cling on. At the moment, there's this kind of idea we need to wait for the proper guidance to come out. There's a lot of kind of stalling that's taking place. But it's like we were saying about in relation to the police and other things, like this thing is really bedded in, not because people have thought about it, just because they, are more concerned about being called names rather than actually upholding fair sport and so on. But it was a nice example of just how much more confidence people now have, I think, in pushing back against this.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, like, every interview I've seen on the BBC where they've, talked about the issue of women's sports, particularly since that ruling, has focused on how sad it is for men not to be allowed to.
The real victims.
The real victims.
This, and, they're not allowed to play in the sport they love. Well, they are allowed to play. They're just playing in the wrong category.
Well, but this is the thing. The people that claim to be so inclusive are not in favour of trans-only sporting leagues or sporting categories. They try their view of their view of inclusivity is to shoehorn male athletes into female sport, which is absolutely baffling. Every time I say, hey, trans people should be included, they should have their own league, people are like, no, that's impractical. But what you're really saying is you're just using them as sort of a political pawn. It's the same thing as sort of shelters for like trans individuals. When I said this, like Orange was like, no, there's not enough trans people. I'm like, but surely the concern should be they're like scared for their lives. They should have a safe space for them while not infringing upon women who are been, victims of domestic violence. But no, that's not it. We need to hear from men about how other men who feel like they're not men should be shoehorned into women's spaces. Or the thing that annoys me the most, we need to have a conversation about it, as if we are all deaf and we lack basic knowledge to observe one of the most obvious realities of biology and human life, which is that there are two sexes and they're not interchangeable. On female sports, actually, as particularly football, I have a unique gripe because I've been trying to campaign to have the pitches made smaller. I don't know if you've ever watched women's football.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And it's terrible because let me tell you.
You said it, not us.
Hold on, let me tell you why. It's not terrible because the female athletes are bad. So they actually did a study where they showed two football players, a man and a woman, but they from the neck down, so you couldn't actually tell the gender difference.
Yeah.
In it's kind of like racing. They're actually extremely good athletes.
Yeah.
Just even get to that level, they're very good, and the quality of the football is just as good as each other. So there's this is not idea that the women can't play football, but the problem is because you have women play on pitches that are designed for men.
Yeah.
Their shots don't go as far. It slows down the game. They look like toddlers in the goalpost because their arm width, sort of the width from the both points of the arms, is not long enough. But when you say this, it kind of seems like, oh, you're just dumbing down women's sports, or you're trying to remove the legitimacy of women's football. There is literally no other sport where men and women play, like tennis, for example, where the sport isn't accommodated for the woman's figure, because it's not just about recognizing that men and women are different. You also have to accommodate them.
Yeah.
Not just because you want the enjoyment of the sport and the sport to go far and to do well and to get more bums on seats so that women don't whinge about unequal payment, unfair payment or whatever, but because you actually believe in that sport. But they don't do that. You speak to any of them and they're like, oh no, you just let them play on the same pitches as men. Oh, is that because you don't want to put money behind actually getting female football pitches? It's incredible. It's like asking me to play tennis on on ice.
Well, I think we have learned how little people care about women's sports.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
it has
exactly.
been quite eye-opening, especially among the sort of celebrity set who claim to be so inclusive.
Yeah.
I mean, Gary Lineker, for instance, was did an interview with the Telegraph this week where he basically just said it's a non-issue, which is obviously nonsense.
And it is funny as well because, Gary Lineker aside, there's a certain type of commentator who are constantly, when the women won the Euros and so on, they were like, we really need to support women's football, even though, they probably never watched another game after that.
They don't actually care about it. Because
Exactly.
what makes football so valuable, such a high value industry, and all getting people to pay hundreds of pounds for football tickets, is because it's entertaining to watch. It is not entertaining when you're asking people to watch a slowed down version of what they enjoy. Like you have to put the spectator in mind, and this is actually good for women's football as well. If you actually got people watching and saying, actually, there's not really much difference between the male and female sport, they're going just as fast because you've accommodated the pitch to the athlete, or the setting or the environment to the athlete, that makes a lot more sense than just saying, oh yeah, support women's football. No.
And as you say, it's standard practice tennis, fewer sets and so on.
Exactly.
This is obvious,
There's literally no other sport where men and
Yeah.
women actually do the same activity where it's not accommodated for women in the same way that it's accommodated for men. It's just female football. And guess what? It's because the Football Federation are cheap and they don't want to invest.
And it's so funny that at the same time they're like, it's a high point for women's football, we should invest in it. Also, we should allow men to play in it, maybe.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Those two
Yeah,
things are
exactly.
happening at the same
Exactly.
time.
And
It's
since
fucking
no one has
ridiculous.
taken the open goal, let's say that in women's football, there should be one ball on the pitch.
You've been sitting on that, so to speak.
And no Adam's apples. None. Zero. I don't want to see any Adam's apples. I don't want to see anything dangling between the legs.
Yeah.
None of it.
Great. Thank you so much for watching the Spiked podcast. We'll be back at the same time next week. In the meantime, why not subscribe to Spike's YouTube channel and then click the bell so you're always alerted whenever there's some new content. Spiked is producing more videos than ever, from podcasts like this one to interviews to our series of polemics. You really, really don't want to miss out on it. Plus, to get your daily dose of Spiked, just go to spiked-online.com. That's our website at spiked-online.com.